Thank you for joining us. I'm Mike Spence on the TSPN TV News Desk. I have an incredible guest this week. I know nothing about the probation department, but I have the Chief Probation Officer, Mark Bonini. Thanks for joining us here on the news, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's one subject I'm glad I don't know anything about.
That's good.
Most people hear about it at the wrong time. And you handle the responsibilities here in Amador County for all the probation department activities. And a couple of years ago, I guess 2 years ago, there was a realignment with the state activating some different changes.
Yes.
And you've been doing a lot of different things with probation and the amount of people going through our jail system and how they're put on probation, how they're managed, and how they're kept in jail or let out of jail. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of those changes that are still taking place and upcoming in another month or two. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the population in terms of our probation activity here in Amador County?
Sure, and I'm the chair of the Community Corrections Partnership that Realignment actually outlined that needed to be in place here in Amador County. That Community Correction Partnership is made up of some great players and stakeholders in the community. Specifically, the executive committee is made up of the sheriff, myself, again, I'm the chair, the district attorney, one of our local police departments chiefs, which is Jackson Police Department, Scott Morrison. We have Health and Human Services Director Jim Foley on it. We additionally have our court as part of that and is represented by either the presiding judge or their designee. So it isn't just me, but I kind of tend to take a little bit of credit for what's going on. But we have a really good group. Everybody works together great. But Realignment really thrust upon the counties and the locals a new population that was coming to us for supervision services. They used to go to parole. They used to have a parole agent. So really it was just a change in supervision. And then additionally, it outlined who can no longer go to California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, that those offenders would stay local and do their time in jail. So this is impacting our jail somewhat exponentially in that, there's been times over the last year or two we've had upwards of 100 inmates in a 76-bed facility. Today I looked before I came over here and we were running at right about 79, 80 inmates in there. So some of the programming, some of the things we're trying to do is working. The jail, use of a jail bed is the most expensive correctional option that there is. So we want to make sure we have the right populations in those beds that are the most likely to reoffend, that are the most highest risk inmates, and need to stay there as they're pending either their criminal process or they've been sentenced.
Was that realignment that brought those populations down, or just a general reduction in crime, do you think?
I think realignment forced us to take a hard look how we do business. And because we took that look and figured there's some areas we can change some things and do a better job at, it's assisted us in dropping those numbers or at least having more successes rather than failures.
How would you know if something was going wrong with the population now, since it has decreased? Do you get into that comfort zone where you think everything is fine and everything is just going along smoothly, or are there factors that could change? I mean, do people just, more people are getting out or less people are getting out? How does that affect the releases of the prisoners?
Well, I think your first issue with how would we know that there's a problem, I think the telltale sign would be our jail population would go up and we'd have a big spike. I think that if we can steady the ship at the numbers that we're at, I think that's a good sign that things are working and that the fixes or the pieces of the puzzle we put in place are in effect working. But I think I never feel comfortable because we have a legislature that's pretty active. We still have a population, and I say we, in the collective we, the state of California, still has a population issue at CDCR with being over the capacity that a three-judge panel put in place. So we still have to get to that number. How we get to that number, the governor is going to give some direction. I'm sure the legislature is going to have a say, and they're actively working on that. Does something come our way in the future? Possibly, and I think it's important that we're at least prepared in the event that happens. And we're just going to continue to monitor things at the state level. The district attorney, our sheriff, and myself, we all have organizations at the state level that keep track of what's happening, and we try to make our voices heard. That something that may occur or is being bannered about in the legislature, hey, that won't work, or that will work, or Evidence has showed that works. We're going to try to do those things rather than pick something out of the clear blue sky. I think it's evident that none of us want anybody to, walk out of prison and not have some sort of infrastructure in place for community supervision or to access services. I think that's a mistake, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
Is the staffing different in terms of the amount of parolees per parole officer? Has that changed?
Well, parole uses a points system, so it isn't the amount of bodies that a parole agent would supervise. It's my understanding, it's based on offense, criminal history, and things of that nature. They're assigned a point value, and a parole agent can only carry so many points. My department, we base it on bodies. What we do now, because of realignment, and it really drove a lot of what we're currently doing, we're taking a hard look at who we supervise. And because I don't want my caseloads per officer to be around 200 or 180 to 1, we do a risk needs assessment that's an evidence-based tool that really draws down on what the risk factors are and what the needs factors are for an offender, assigns a point value to that person, and then helps us decide or make an educated decision on who's best to supervise. I want to put my resources, my officers, in a position that they can concentrate on our highest risk offenders, our medium risk offenders, and the low risk offender guys. We're going to leave them kind of on the side there. We're going to monitor them, but we're not going to put them under the scrutiny that we do the other two pieces, because that's really where the sweet spot is. It's about community safety. It's about the biggest bang for our buck and making an investment in the biggest part of the bell curve and try to eliminate recidivism amongst these offenders we supervise.
Recidivism, that was the word I was thinking of. I thought it was recidivism. I've got that right now. Yeah, they repeat, offenders, and of course you're coming from. I'm going to make sure you still have your microphone. No, you're lost. I'm going to make sure we correct that. Nobody would hear the rest of the interview there. I think you're still good, Mark.
Okay.
I got you back in. See that?
Good.
Helped you out a little bit.
That's good.
Remember that in the future.
I appreciate it.
In case I ever come to your desk in the office. Fortunately, I've never had a need like that. I don't know that much about probationary efforts, but what it means to the public in terms of the type of offenders. You handle most of the offenders that go through the jail system, which is over near City Hall, the sheriff's office. And how many offenders you're saying? 100? It went from 121 down to 80, 90?
The jail population, it's been as high, at least the roster has been as high as 112, 115, 117. And again, currently today it was sitting at 80. And I think that's indicative of having the right populations in custody. It's indicative of the court system getting cases through court, so there aren't offenders sitting awaiting trial or awaiting sentencing, whatever the case may be. Of that 80 number that's in jail, it's about 70% pretrial, 30% sentenced, and part of realignment what we did, and that was roughly the number even when realignment started, where we were at with pretrial versus sentence. We thought, hey, let's look at the biggest piece of meat there, and that's the pretrial guys. Let's make sure and do an assessment on that population and see if they need to stay in jail pending the outcome of their case. And we've done that, and we put in place, which we've never had before, a pretrial supervision program for offenders, so that if an offender is OR'd or over OR'd with conditions, or OR means own recognizance release, that there's somebody there to supervise them and begin to offer them services even before sentencing has occurred. We've never done that, and at any given time, we could have anywhere between 3 to 12 offenders in that program. It could go as high as 20. We could use GPS services on them, and again plug them into services locally. The idea being is let's try to get to those guys early and girls early and start offering services and hopefully correct some of that behavior.
Now, these are offenders that the sheriff has put into jail, obviously, but when you say pretrial, are you holding people that come over from Mule Creek Prison as well? Are these prisoners that come over from the prison that are being held temporarily at the jail? How many people like that are going through the system? Every
now and again, there'll be a Mule Creek inmate that will come through our jail, and for whatever reason they reached their parole date, but they committed a new offense and they're going to be housed in jail pending their case. They would fall outside of our pretrial supervision program. Obviously, their risks or their needs would be beyond what we would want in a pretrial environment. So what we'd continue to try to do is, again, assess them, look at them, give the judge an idea of who's before them, and then let the judge ultimately make that decision. We're not doing anything without the judge's approval.
You have a pretty predictable population of people who you're working with and who you're trying to help, and they fall into certain predictable categories. You're not getting somebody from Mule Creek that's just out of range in terms
right.
of your services. You know, you have a pretty regular thing that you're doing, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in the second part of the show, in terms
Sure.
of second part of our news broadcast, in terms of some of the programs that you're providing now that are a little bit different. But I know that coming up in July too, there was a big change in terms of how these prisoners go in front of a judge in a court instead of a probation officer, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I think there are a couple of different items that we can discuss. You have a lot of details that are very informative, and I'm glad that we have you here, Mark, because this is a situation, you know, most people, as I mentioned before, just are completely unaware of, and you have some great programs, and we're going to talk a little bit about that when we come back. But before we do, I didn't even ask you, you obviously have a family here in
Yes.
Amador County. You're a local person.
I've been with the department over 16 years, resident here in the county for that same period of time. I have 2 boys, 10 local schools, so yeah, I'm all in here.
That's exactly what we wanted to know. I should have started with that because you know, we like to know who's in charge, especially with these management responsibilities. You know, you're really protecting the public out there, and you know, public safety is a huge issue. And it sounds like you have a great committee of collaborative people who are helping
Yes.
you, obviously. But the, you know, your offices are up there near on New York Ranch Road.
Yes.
You're not at the jail. You have offices up there, New York Fitness. We're going to come back after the break, and we're going to talk more about your programs.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Mark.
You're watching Amador County's local television network, TSPN.